Hey there. So, today we are going to be going back to our little vector image editor scene graph program. I'm still trying to decide what exactly it's going to be. I think that today we'll be looking at making this into a proper kind of event-driven application. And let's review this code again. So basically we have a couple of shapes, an ellipse and a circle that inherits from the ellipse class. And the idea is just like take the draw ellipse function and then make all the parameters properties on the object. And you can also move it around by moving the left and bottom coordinates. And the circle subclasses that and then has the ability to get and set the radius. We then made it so that the circle is going to follow the mouse around, and you can use the mouse wheel to make the circle a bit smaller or bigger. And been thinking about it a couple days. We're going to attach this to an event loop. Need to make it so that we can manipulate both of the objects, ultimately give it some way of adding more objects to the scene. And we got to be able to save and load this thing to disk. So that'll be pretty interesting. So let's get to it. In the lib folder, you see there is an events file. Basically, this gives you the ability to set up an event loop. Basically, you set up some event handlers, and then in place of the main loop I have in my program, just call event loop.run. And you can see that's like instead of having an explicit check for the escape key, you just set up your event loop to have a function that gets called every time the escape key is pressed. Of course, we're using mouse events. We need to look through here and see what we would use for handling a mouse event. Because we have the mouse move and we have the scroll wheel. I'm not seeing anything about the axis in here. So the scroll wheel is one of the axes that you can check. And I'm also not seeing anything it's called every time the mouse moves, which is not the worst thing. Ultimately, I'm not going to have it responding to every mouse move regardless. Let's see what onUpdate does. So it's initialized to null and then gets called every time. Let's start by setting that up. So we need to import the events library, call event loop.run, and set up the onUpdate function. Alright. So for the on update, let's just grab all that. And let's have it respond to an escape key also. I think that's the right way to do it. If the escape key is pressed, is running equals false. That should kill the loop. And let's test it. Event loop is unknown. Right, because it is actually events.event loop. And we're right back to where we started, which is just fine. It's funny because the mouse wheel is having a different effect than it was before. It's my imagination, or is it growing and shrinking slower than it was? And I think I know why. Here, I will show you. It's this. This is the equivalent of the while loop I was using. And this yield actually makes sure that the program doesn't run as absolutely fast as it's able to. It's going to yield back to the operating system. I think it limits it to 60 frames per second, I think. Which is fine. Most programs don't need more than 60 frames per second anyway. When I use that running property off of the event loop in place of my own is running variable. So hitting escape will then dump us back at the command prompt. Alright, cool. Now another thing I would like to do when we start the program, we are creating two shapes every single time, in the same place every single time. And what I would like to do is be able to, like on program exit, do some sort of save state, and then when the program starts, do a load state, so that you're resuming from where you left off. So let's see how we might do that. I've never actually tried serializing a bunch of objects in Miniscript before. Let me think. Making this up as I go here. We have a bunch of functions off of the file object for opening files, writing lines to files. Let me think. So we're talking about serialization, taking a live object, converting it into data, and then restoring the original object from data. Right, load state isn't defined yet. And I think there's probably a library for this. There's actually two. There's the JSON and there's TSV. And if my memory serves me correctly, TSV is going to be a bit faster here. Read tab separated. Let's see. A tab separated file. It's like say you have, yeah, I'm not sure this is the proper format for this, because a tab separated file is like there's an example down here. You got column headers, and you have a bunch of rows, and each column is separated by a tab. But I think it makes more sense to me to use JSON for this, because each object could have different properties, so storing it all in a table doesn't really make sense to me. And all this is to parse a JSON file. See, via JSON string parses it, and there's a toJSON, which might be exactly what we need. Let's scroll through this, see if there's anything else I need to know. At the end of most of these library files, there's a little test program. Gives an example of how to use the library. So I think JSON has a parse and a toJSON. Let's import that. And I want to be able to convert this entire scene into a JSON file. In order to do that, we are going to try to do it like this. Hopefully I'm getting the syntax right. I've been hopping between too many languages today. So you have a scene, which is an array of objects, and then grab the circle out so that our event loop can respond to it. Instead of drawing each object individually, we're just going to loop through our scene and draw everything in it. Let's make sure that still works. Alright, so that still works. Still miss with our circle. Now, we're going to implement, let's start with save state. Going to try the simple approach here. JSON.toJSON, feed it the scene object. We're just going to see if it can serialize that whole chunk. And then return a string. We need to save that string to a file. We have write lines. What if I wanted to just write one line? I mean, it's not really that hard. File, write lines, and then path, text. So it expects an array of lines, so we create an array with our one thing. Let's run that, and get the parameters. Let's run that and see if it saves. Move this around a bit. Let's make it big, because then if we save it, if it saves and then reloads properly, we should end up with a big circle when we reload the thing. Or, it could crash. Key not found to JSON. Okay, let's look at the JSON library file again. Parse. Oh, all caps. That will get you. Okay, let's try that again. Make the circle really big, and then we're going to save it. And there is a scene file. Can't read it there. There we go. Let's clear that. Alright, so this is what happens if you serialize an object as is. You just throw it in there, and I don't think this is going to be what we want, because it keeps... I don't know if this one is the circle or the ellipse. We don't need all these little function doodads. We're gonna have to be a little bit smarter. And here is how we are going to be a little bit smarter. Each object is going to have to know how to convert to JSON. Let me think. We don't really have multi-line strings here. Store the class name, and then we store all the properties from the class. Left, bottom, width, height, color, pen size. Actually, we can do it like this. I think we can do it like this. the fill function will basically, it's kind of like string interpolation. You can either fill it with an array and then put in the index of the array in these curly brackets, or you can feed it an object and it will use these, like these are the property names on the object you're filling in with. Circle is similar, but I want to make sure we serialize. When we deserialize, it has to deserialize a circle. And we can either reproduce this entire 2JSON, or we could do this. Which I think might be better for us long term. Now, if we do that, we should be able to loop through those objects now to generate some sort of JSON object. Problem is, both of these are going to return strings. Oh. Okay. I see what I should have done instead. And it actually... Okay, here, new idea. We're going to do that. Side effect of figuring this out as I go. We're going to return simple maps and let the serializer handle converting the JSON. Which should make it easier for this whole thing to fit into the same framework. Okay, cool. This is actually a really good idea. So save state. So for each object in the scene, we're going to let that object explain what should be serialized to JSON. That'll give us a simpler object array, and we'll then take that, convert it to JSON text, and write it to the file. But now, let's make a really big circle. Big, 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 big. And exit. Let's view our scene. And there you go. A simple array with two objects, and the circle is big. Alright, so now that we have our JSON, we need to be able to load that JSON file. Let's see what the best way is to load all that from a file. I can read all the lines. Do I then need to paste it all together? Well, there you go. Nice little example. We'll take that. So we have, that should give us an array of objects. We're returning a scene, which is an array of the serialized objects, or deserialized objects, actually. So if we have an ellipse, allow the ellipse to deserialize it. If we have a circle, allow the circle to deserialize it. The way we do that it should work just like that, because all those JSON properties will be deserialized into this object map, and we should be able to just pass all of those back into the constructor to get our ellipse. Oh. Well, the circle make function, it has a width and height because of how it inherits from ellipse, but it really just cares about the radius. So I'm going to rewrite this a bit. Instead of saving the width and height of a circle, we're just going to save the radius. Although that should work, but we need to rebuild our scene file, so run that, get a really big circle so we have a nice giant circle to save. Radius not found in map. Of course it's not found in map. Okay, try that again. And exit, clear, view our scene file. The circle now has a radius. The left is kind of off to the left, off the screen to the left, which makes sense. And you can see in there that it is blue. Oh, I want to test this. This will just take a second. I want to edit the file and see if the changes are reflected back into the runtime. So there's our JSON file. Red, second to our green, last to our blue. So we're going to make it a greenish circle and thicken the pen size of the ellipse. And there you go. You can see the changes reflected in the file. Let's make sure we are actually loading it. One of the things here, I only want to load the file if it exists. So if the scene exists, scene file exists, then we load it. Otherwise, we will build the scene like we were originally. And we're going to continue with manually loading in the circle right now, though eventually I want to make the circle object respond to events directly, which will simplify some more of that code. So let's see if it works. If it works, then we should have a green circle and a really thick ellipse. But we have an error on line A7. Let's see. Okay, that's not super descriptive. Type error while attempting to look up read. So file I'm not seeing a read function there. File.open, and then there's a .read there. Let's see, file.open. It's a file handle object. Tell me more, tell me more. If it ever loads. Oh, I don't need the details. I know the problem. It's that. Need to be passing in the file name. It's expecting a file name. Let's see if that fixes it. Class name not found. Line 90. That should have worked. Because I'm saving as class instead of class name. Yeah, sure. Try again, and this index went out of range. Line 124. Oh, it's because I'm not actually adding it to the scene. And we have 2 circles. Why do I have 2 circles? Should have a red ellipse and a green circle. And it looks like we have 2 green circles. Going from JSON on both objects. Print out the object, see what we got. Huh. Why is it making the wrong type of ellipse? It can see the right type of object. It's pushing it into the array. But after it deserializes it, the color is wrong. Oh. That's wrong. Oh. I'm not doing a new circle. I'm just doing circle dot make. So it is modifying the properties on the base type instead of making a new instance. Okay. That will probably help. Oh, let me remove those debug lines. And I think that does it. Ta-da! We are deserializing our objects from JSON. And that is all I'm going to try to do with this project today. Next, in the next episode of this project, we're going to look at attaching event handlers directly to our object types so that we can click on objects and drag them around and maybe resize them with bounding boxes, and that could be interesting. And that is all for today. See you later.